like to be sensitive to that. But we should start on time here pretty soon.
And we are now recording. So for those of you that are on the call and you know someone that was unable to make the call, please let them know that this video will be recorded and we will post the link on our council website in the next day or so. And we will send out that information through our district executives' emails.
Well, I'm ready to get going since we're recording, and I'm sure that people will trickle in. A lot of the other meetings are scheduled right now, so there was a lot of interest in the recording, and we'll try to keep that as an internal kind of training opportunity. But we use the web to distribute that, as Carl had said. So this evening we'll be on for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Reginald is joining us on screen. And I think we're going to try to keep the videos to just as panelists and myself, just so I think that will help keep the speaker in your at the top of the frame in your Zoom call. So thanks for joining us, everybody. To the audience and to our panelists, thank you for joining the conversation this evening. Tonight we have a discussion with two influential human resource professionals. Considering each is in charge of directing and developing human resources for their company, being a leading international research and development corporation or one of the very best options for higher education in the world, these two are directly involved with defining the direction of their organizations through the people they bring on board, and they continue to invest in training. In developing this panel as a program of the Five Rivers Council Inclusion Committee, I thought it would be interesting to hear from them on what characteristics they look for in employees, if Scouts stand out among those applicants, and if Scouting, especially Eagle Scouts, consistently offer, that positive constellation of characteristics. But even more so, I wanted to discuss their take on how diversity positively impacts their organizations and guides their human resource development. As we all know, the Boy Scouts of America have been experiencing some growing pains, as I like to call it. But with the expansion of potential membership base to all youth, the organization is poised to solidify itself as the organization for youth development. So if we as leaders in the Scouting movement adopt the growth mindset that's in place at the leading corporations and higher education organization, it stands to reason that Five Rivers Council will continue to be a leader in Scouting. We've seen membership growth where most councils have struggled, and we've balanced our finances up into the pandemic at least, and we have a really incredible strong volunteer base. So that's what this is about, is like embracing that change and kind of leveraging it to reach out across the street, as I like to say it, in the neighborhood to find some new members and help develop a program that's consistent, but maybe tailored to different audiences. So with that, I want to just give a brief, the biographies of our two panelists. They're going to basically speak for 10 minutes each, give or take, and then we'll open it up to if there's any questions, or we can do a Q&A or a conversation. First person to speak is Jennifer Bubel she's the manager of talent management at Siemens Corporation. She spent 20 years in organizational leadership, actually, let me introduce her first. She can speak. When she finishes, I'll explain Reginald's background. I think that might benefit the two of them. So she spent 20 years in organizational leadership development after earning her bachelor's degree from Brockport and then her master's from Ithaca College. Siemens Energy, she's responsible for global performance management program and is a program manager for an early career leadership development program that sees a 90% retention rate. So if I understand that correctly, you're investing in your own staff and they're sticking around. That's awesome. She is a certified Scrum Master trained in the Agile software development life cycle. And in her personal time, she's developing you're developing a rock and jazz drummer and teaching yourself German in your free time. As a drummer, I can at least support you there. I'm trying to learn Spanish. Anyway, of particular interest to the audience, has served for 2 years as a volunteer in the Williamson Road District Eagle Scout Board of Review. And so with that, I'm going to turn it right over to you, Jennifer. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me today, Brett. Welcome everyone on the call today. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts I have about scouting, leadership, and not only what it means to me, but what I see in the organization that I work with and what we look for in the values and characteristics of our employee as it's reflected in scouting. So bear with me. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about how I got here. So 2 years ago, I was asked to join the Eagle Scout Board of Review. And the idea was, we were starting to incorporate females into the organization. The idea was of bringing diversity and a different perspective into the Eagle Scout process, the interview process. And when I walked in with 20 years of leadership development at the corporate level, I thought I had a lot that I could bring to the Eagle Scouts and also to the Boy Scouts. And then as I started to be involved in the process, I realized that the greater takeaway was my perspective and my experience. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So as mentioned, I was brought in to kind of engage a little bit and learn more about the Scouts and how I could support the Eagle Board of Review. And I learned that I really didn't know much about scouting. Outside of what you know, they camp, they hike, they make stuff, and they help elderly people get across the street. Basically what I understood. And what I got very quickly is that I was going to need to educate myself. So one of the first things I did is I went out and I bought the Boy Scout, the handbook, and I read it, as you can see with some of the tabs. What struck me was the first part of why the Scouts were founded. And what Robert Baden-Powell, his whole purpose, to fashion an organization around the idea of being prepared. And not just be prepared in case there's an emergency, be prepared to give back to the community, be prepared to be a good citizen. And what the scouting I've learned is about leadership, but it's about servant leaders who stand on a set of principles, and that's significant. So as I was learning more about this servant leadership that scouting is based on, and I had the opportunity to see these applicants go through an intense interview process, and it's pretty intense. I saw these folks emerge who, if you know much about scouting, once you're 18, you lose the opportunity to become an Eagle Scout. So the window is very small in your opportunity to actually apply to be an Eagle. So the folks you have in front of you are quite young, but of course, after you reach a certain age, everybody's young. And the interesting part of this is these folks, these applicants, they have to identify a community project to get it approved. They have to raise the money, coordinate with people to get all of this stuff for the project. And the biggest takeaway from me is they never get any credit for it. So you probably have driven by a number of Eagle Scout projects in your community, a trailhead that was suddenly cleared, or signage on a trail that was all of a sudden replaced and upgraded. And it was most likely done by an Eagle Scout and some scouts supporting that individual. You'll never see a name of a Eagle Scout on there because that's not the point. The point is to give back. The point is servant leadership, giving back to the community. And it struck me that such an organization existed, and I became envious because I think I reflect back on every great leader I've had the opportunity to work with in a corporation is they were all servant leaders. And there's a part of me that secretly wants to know whether they were part of scouting at all. Did that factor into who they were and why they were so great at leading people? I'd like to think that they were. But the biggest part of this whole process for me is not really understanding how it was going to impact me and feeling part of something that's bigger than myself. And I watched these applicants come through, and they They have this tremendous project in front of them, and they're never at a loss of people that want to help. I mean, think about it. Your Saturday afternoon, you're going to stay outside on a Saturday afternoon on a snowy, rainy day, clearing brush off of a trail. I mean, who does that? Who signs up for it? But people do. I mean, not just people in scouting. I mean, when these projects come through, there are people in the community who just want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And that's really what I found in scouting, in this servant leader principled approach in our community, is it brings this hope and respect and sense of togetherness that no other organization I've ever been affiliated with does. And I think that's pretty special and important. So as I find myself part of this organization, I'm humbled. And I'm also humbled by the idea that these folks who take no credit for what they do continue to give back, most of them, to scouting. I'm not surprised from the folks that I've encountered in the Eagle Board reviews that this group has had a good recruiting stint in getting people to join. I feel like it's alive, and there's a sense of hope and need, not just in this community, but in the world at large. So, you know, my duty to scouting is to do everything I can to not only support this and keep what a great organization going, but also how I take the lessons learned, this principled servant leader, that idea, and bring it into my organization and who I am as a professional, and how I can make an impact in my organization. Now, that might sound lofty, but a lot of what the Scouts talk about are lofty goals, and a lot of what they expect in terms of standards is a really high bar, and all of those things conspire to be an incredible organization. You know, I'm also taken by the idea of this law that has 12 points to it: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean is my favorite, by the way, and reverent. None of that is about dominating or taking charge, or I'm responsible, or I'm the leader. All of it is about personal care and personal responsibility. I can't help but think what the world would be like if everyone lived by such principles and standards. If everyone woke up, regardless of your affiliation with the Scouts, and committed to doing a good turn daily, what things might look like, how things might be different. So I'm honored to be a part of scouting. I'm honored to say that you know, that I've helped this organization in its quest to really turn out people who will be prepared, and they will be there in every way, shape, or form to give back to their communities as good citizens and as good individuals. So there's really all that I wanted to say, is just on pride in being a part of this organization, and look forward to any questions, comments that you might have later on in the segment.
Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to hand it over to Reginald White. I'll give you his brief bio here and let him take over. So Reginald H. White is the Senior Director of Human Resources for the Research Division at Cornell University. In his role, he manages the delivery of human resources services for the division and the research centers that report to the Office of the Vice Provost for Research. He is also responsible for the research communications function, which helps to tell the stories of Cornell researchers. Reginald is a strategic partner to the Vice Provost, and in that role helps to influence the future of research at the university. In addition, he serves as an executive coach to faculty and staff and conducts presentations across campus on leadership and diversity and inclusion. Reginald also serves as the chair for the Men of Color Colleague Network Group. Prior to returning to Cornell, he was president of a consulting firm, Torin Enterprises LLC, that specialized in executive coaching, diversity, and leadership development. In his role, he has traveled extensively and facilitated sessions in South Africa, Amsterdam, and London. Prior to that, he was at Merrill Lynch as Vice President, Divisional Marketing Manager. Before joining Merrill Lynch, he spent a number of years at Fidelity Investments in various roles, including Vice President of Marketing, Internal Management Consultant, and Vice President Human Resources. Reginald is an active Cornell alum, currently serving as the immediate past president, Human Ecology Alumni Board, member of Mosaic at Large, and the University Board of Trustees. He received his bachelor's in psychology at Cornell University and his executive MBA at Boston University. With that, Reginald.
Thank you, Brett. And as Jen mentioned, I'm happy to be here. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to talk with you today. And listening to Jen talk about, sort of her experience with Scouting, I have a slightly different take on sort of my experience with Scouting. But before I started that, I thought we called this leadership with a growth mindset, and Brett mentioned what growth mindset, and it's language that people often hear but don't actually know the details in terms of what it is. And so I've spent much of my career understanding it and trying to practice it and trying to encourage people to develop that kind of mindset. So in simple terms, a growth mindset says that you have the ability to learn and to grow and to be successful in whatever it is you endeavor to do. It's the opposite of this idea that we are born with a limited set of capabilities and our lives are defined by those boundaries. So a growth mindset says I'm born with what I have and I can develop more based on the use of effective effort and effective strategies. I think the reason why this matters is because the Boy Scouts and many organizations are at a pivotal point in terms of their trajectory going forward. That is, the society at large is becoming more and more diverse. It's predicted by 2050 that the US will be a majority-minority society. And so what that means is, so all the wonderful things that Jen talked about is really creating the opportunity for more and more young men and women to have the opportunity to learn these fundamental skills around servant leadership, around the sort of idea of hope and respect. And so part of the challenge, right, in terms of the growth mindset is what can we do from where we stand to share that paradigm of how to live with more and more young people. It reminds me of a story in terms of my own life and my own experience with the Scouts. My family had moved to a smaller community from where we were living. We were living downstate, and we were living closer to New York City, and we moved a little further away. And I'm one of 4 children, 3 boys, and my father decided in that first year living in this new town that he would get us involved in the Scouts. And it turned out that the Scout leader lived around the corner from us, so it was easy to get to meetings. We could literally walk. We did a number of activities. I think we were called Weeblos. We had what I remember to be some positive experiences, but then something happened. I don't know what. I never was able to ask my parents, and they pulled us out of the scouting troop. And it had an impact on me in terms of just sort of thinking about, well, what was that experience like? What happened in terms of the conversation with my parents? What happened in terms of their perspective about what I was learning or what they felt was going on? I just don't know. Again, it was just one of those things. You're a kid. I was about 10 years old. And so I had no idea what happened. I just know that it ended relatively abruptly. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, from that point through my early adult years, I interact with Scouts. People would talk about their experience with the Eagle Scouts or having achieved that level or being, at the various levels. I'd see, uniforms, and I'd see, the badges and people's pride in accomplishing various things. But I felt personally, right, that had been an opportunity that I'd been exposed to just briefly, but then it had been denied to me as an opportunity going forward, again, for reasons I don't know. Now, some of it, to be fair, had more to do with my family's internal challenges. And if the next few years, my parents divorced, we left that town, etc. But something happened while we were still there in terms of the interaction. I don't know what that was. But later, I have my own two sons, and for a number of years, we never thought about scouting, in part because in the back of my mind, I was the question of what did I learn or what did I experience, although in my various roles in recruiting people and talking to people, I had seen people who had pride in their affiliation with the Scouts. Um, what I recently remembered when I was having this conversation with my wife was that we did have a period, my sons were about 10. We lived in a community in Connecticut, and some of their classmates were going through the Scouts participation. And so we got them involved, and we did something with derby cars, and it was quite an experience. I used one of those little saws and made a mess and put a hole in the floor, and I mean, it was an experience, but also similar to what happened with us or with me. We chose not to continue, not because something bad happened, but just because our children, our sons, as they started getting a little bit older, their interests started shifting, and we got them, like my father did, got me involved in some sports. And both of my sons have participated in sports at various points as they have gone through their young lives and early adulthood. But the point is really that there is an opportunity. These things around respect and servant leadership and hope and being a good citizen and doing a good deed daily, these are lessons that are universal, and they are foundational. As Jen talked about, we work with leaders in our organizations, and we can tell the difference between people who sort of see themselves in a space where they want to be, where they see leadership as an honor, where they see the ability to do good things for other people as part of their responsibility as leaders, and we can see the opposite of that. So I think the future will continue to need people with those skills. I think the future will challenge us to get out of our comfort zone relative to which kids we want to mentor and want to engage with. And part of the challenge in that space, right, is thinking about what you offer and thinking about how you get to know those communities and those young people, and then sort of following up. I don't know whether, in my own experience as a child, whether the scout leader had the skill set to really sort of understand how to continue to keep me and my brothers engaged. And it's a skill set that gets learned, right? It's this sort of seeing all children with the potential to have enhanced and better lives as a result of the experience. So, and then, again, going back to my experience as a human resource professional, again, I talk to people every day. I interact with leaders every day. I hire people, I interview people. And, when people talk about their scouting experience, I can tell there's a certain level of pride if they share it. It doesn't fundamentally alter my decision around whether to hire them, because obviously I'm hiring them for a lot of other reasons. But like Jen said, it does in fact trigger something in terms of understanding their commitment to working together with other people. In the same way, sports gives the opportunity to think about the world beyond oneself. And so I think there's something great about the organization. I think there is an opportunity. You're at the positive thing is that you've continued to have growth, and I think there could be even more growth as you begin to expand your purview around which kids can be involved and begin to build in these young ages opportunities for children to get to know other children who don't necessarily look like them or don't have the same exact experiences as them, but who share a desire to be better human beings. And that desire to be better human beings is something, again, as Jen said, if you imagine a world in which we teach our children at a very young age the opportunity to be hopeful and respectful and to be servant leaders and to have this sort of idea that we're working together, not because we're going to get recognition or notice for it, but because it's the right thing to do. So I'd leave you with this idea of doing a good deed daily is a model for an extraordinary life. You already know this, and I think it's important for more and more people, more young people, to have that as a mindset. And I think the future looks bright if, in fact, more people know about that and are living it out daily. So with that, I will end and go back out to Brett.
Thank you, Reginald. You can keep your camera on, and Jen, you can join us if you want, because I do want to run some questions by you.
Yep.
And you know, there's a few people on the chat here who are welcome to chime in too and join the conversation. Some of these questions are kind of we developed them ourselves as we discussed this, and some are from the external, people that wanted me to ask them. But the first one that I wanted to go back to, and this is for Reginald, because in your experience going internationally, you kind of put yourself in some unique circumstances, right? Things that forced you to have a mindset, an open mindset, kind of took you out of your element. And I've been thinking about, you had to adapt, you were successful. The people who you interacted with probably benefited, and it is an exchange. And so there's also this element of, like, in our own communities, if you're a unit leader, and membership, it often boils down to whether or not you asked the question, whether or not you had a chip in your pocket that was a reminder to hand out, like a business card or whatever, or it's just like the ask sometimes doesn't occur, and it's oftentimes a missed opportunity. And so, like, if the barrier there is, I don't know how to talk to that person. I want to grow the unit here, and have more fun. But units are usually more successful when there's a larger group of kids. So, like, getting across that barrier, which is mostly psychological, but, like, can you tell us a little bit about your international travels? Like, you had a good story or two about that, and
Yeah. So first, in terms of the fundamental question, right? In terms of, how do we overcome the barrier that, as you describe, is in our own mind, in interacting with another human being. The first thing is to really acknowledge that that person in front of us is a human being. And so what I found in my international travels, one of my favorite stories comes from an experience that I had when I went to Amsterdam. And so the short version of that story goes that I was invited by my business partners. They were doing some work there, and I wasn't exactly excited to even go. And in fact, I sort of pushed back. No, I can't go. I've got a conflict, et cetera. And they were like, no, we need you there. Come. So I took a red eye and checked into the hotel, took a quick shower, and went to the hotel where we were holding an event. And there were about 75, 80 people there. And I later learned that most of these people, English wasn't their first language. They had, I want to say, 70 different native languages. I don't know 70 different languages, and so that was a surprise to me. But one of the things that was really fascinating was, as I was standing there, that when I got there, they were on break, and people started coming up to me one by one, introducing themselves and saying hello and shaking my hand. And it was just fascinating because I was thinking, I didn't really even want to be here, and who are these people and what's going on? And then as I had an opportunity to speak in front of them, later people would come up and talk to me and talk about how the experience happened. And one of my favorite stories is a young man came up to me and he says, "You look like my Uncle Roy." And I'm like, well, I have an Uncle Roy, and well, my Uncle Roy could possibly have been in Amsterdam. And so, we joked about it. The next day he came in and lo and behold, he brings a picture and I do look like his Uncle Roy. But what was fascinating about that experience for me was how humbled I was by the fact that people were willing to engage with me. And I began to ask the question, who was I being that made it possible for strangers from different countries that I've never been to engage with me? And here's what I learned. I approached it, even though I didn't really want to be there initially. Once I got there, I was curious. I was open-minded. I was open-hearted. And so as I stood there watching them, it was clear, it was coming out of my pores that I was open to the experience. And so then as I had the experience with each person, right, they could give to me from their place of openness as well, and they could match my energy. And in matching my energy, the more people came up to me and said hello, the more, the softer I became as a human being, the more open I became. Literally, by the time it was all over, that break was over, you know, what my first thing was, wow, I didn't know I was supposed to be here, but thank you for such a wonderful reception. And so what I find is that as I've traveled around the world, when I have the mindset that the people I'm interacting with have something to teach me about the human experience, when I come to the space with this idea that I should be open-minded, that I should be open-hearted around the experience, then magic happens, right? I learn all kinds of wonderful experiences about the people who are in front of me, and I'm enhanced because of the opportunity. So I think that's the lesson, right? Is to sort of hold the space that says, in the space of servant leadership, to be a servant leader, you have to humble oneself so that you're able to engage in such a way that you can have a transformative impact on the people who you are leading. And that starts with, who have you decided to be in any given moment? And one of the things that's also interesting, I'll say, in terms of my experience of traveling around the world, is we used to have this sort of conversation that there's a moment when you step on a stage and you start speaking to people, but there's all these moments before that, and people are watching every single moment. And so if you get up on the stage and you say, hey, I'm a wonderful person and I'm beautiful, and then before you get on the stage, you're a nasty person, or when somebody picks you up at the airport, you're nasty, right? Then there's no congruence. And so part of it is to cultivate the ability to be open-minded, cultivate the ability to be humbled, cultivate the ability to do a good deed daily. And so
Right.
then, right, when you interact with another person, this could be your good deed, right? To get out of your comfort zone and reach out from a place of humanity to another young person or to their parents in such a way that they see that you're open. I mean, the thing, you know this better than I do, you're not just doing this for the young people. You're interacting and impacting a whole family. And so the parents have to be convinced that it's a safe place, that you're a good person as a leader, that the things you're going to teach their child are things that are valuable. If they see you modeling behavior that they want in their child, then that has an appeal to it.
Right. That's good. I mean, that's perfect. And Jennifer, I wanted to bring you into that too, because one of the questions was, is scouting still relevant? Are people interested, parents? And then also the key to that question I think is really interesting is, do we need to change the way that we deliver the program if we're dealing with members of the community who are different and different backgrounds? So, I mean, we talked about, and we had a lot of discussions leading up to this event, which is why this can be a conversation, but we talked about the fact that the program itself is pretty universal from what we can tell from our experience and our backgrounds. It doesn't need a lot of core changes. What scouting provides and the way that it does it is interesting to the youth and the parents, as long as the parents trust leadership. I mean, you guys shake your head. I mean, you agree with that kind of statement?
I do. Mm-hmm. I do.
And okay, I guess that's more of a statement. I think the question was, do we have to tailor programming? And I think I don't think you really do. I think unit activities it's a great program. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, I drink the Kool-Aid because I'm so involved, but like, you can start a unit in any neighborhood and plug in, you know, do the mailbox or whatever it was, the car, and make a hole in the floor. I thought that was funny. You can do that in any neighborhood and the kids still benefit in the same way. You know, there's language barriers potentially, and I think there's always ways to get beyond those issues. But you got a good program, just plug in. So that's sort of a long roundabout way to answer. Like, no, I don't think there's a lot of changes.
I would say this from a perspective of females being introduced to scouting is, first of all, I think there's still some basic, what I call blocking and tackling, that needs to be done in terms of reaching out to females, because even as I tell my colleagues and friends who have children, and I tell them I'm involved in scouting, they always get, but you're a girl, but you're a woman. What are you doing? And, so I don't think the message is out enough. And, frankly, I've had friends of mine that are like, well, I don't want my little girl running through the woods and hiking in the rain. And, and it's more than that. So I think there's so much more than that in terms of some of the merit badges that are available and the opportunities to connect with people. So I feel like there's a great opportunity to kind of rebrand and re-advertise. So we're reaching the full spectrum of youth that could participate. And for the aspect of the parents, I know the one thing I always hear from the parents, my colleagues, is how do I get my kid off the computer or off of a video game? They're really worried about that. If they're not buried into their phone or their computer or a video game, they hardly know that they're home, and it's concerning for them. So, scouting offers a great outlet for them to get outside, to socialize, and to learn. I mean, all these wonderful things that are possibilities. So, I'd personally love to see that. And I know you can say, Brett, I drank the Kool-Aid right with you, because I find myself going into a sales pitch of why it's such a good idea and the benefits, especially now. And I think that there is a void of feeling part of something that's bigger than yourself and being part of something that's truly incredible. And scouting is all of that. So I would love to be able to see us as an organization get out in the community and explain really what it is and what it means, and that everyone has an opportunity to participate.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just chime in on that. But I do think, I don't disagree with anything that was said. And I would say part of the growth mindset is to be open to the idea that perhaps there are tweaks to the programming that would make it more relevant in the current environment. The core tenets around what it is you're trying to teach and the ways in which you're teaching it may be pretty much intact, but being willing to respond to the needs of the people who are participating is, that's a sign of a good business model, right? And so if you have something that you're selling and people are saying, well, in order for it to work really well for me, it would have to have this little tweak and that little tweak, and that audience is important to you, you make that tweak. And so, and part of it, right, is that there is a paradigm. This is why women and their parents who send their little girls, right, do have this sort of paradigm that there's a lot of testosterone built into the scouting way of being, right? And so maybe, right, there's a little bit of softening of that so that these, and what's fascinating, right, is that for the messages around respect and hope and do a good deed daily, right? All of those things are, what some people call the soft skills, right? And yet there's the ruggedness around, being able to build things and do things and being out campfiring, all that kind of stuff, right? Those two things go together. And yet, organizations that don't change in response to the changes around them die. Mm-hmm. So be proud of the programming and look at it and say, this is what we do. And if someone or some group say, it would work better for us if you just softened a little bit, took a little bit of testosterone out of there, then you'll have a better program and you'll have it longer, because you're responding not only to what you want to teach, but what the community wants to learn.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think as units develop and there are all female and all male unit subunits. I guess I'd call it. So yeah, to your point, I think earlier I said the program's fine for either. I think the core tenets, like you said, is exactly right. And then the approach might be slightly different. You know, it might be sleeping in a cabin or at our camp rather than out in a tent might be an option. It's probably an option nowadays for both. And honestly, it depends on the weather. But yeah, I think the finesse is like where the success is, right? So,
Yeah.
good point. Can I tag on to a thing that Jennifer said? You mentioned gaming, and there's a question about, you know, in your professional roles, when you see people in their resumes and then you interview them, are you able to see a difference sometimes between the folks who probably spend a lot of time gaming versus were on team sports or in something like Scout that's a little more social and cooperative?
Yeah, from my personal experience, absolutely. Absolutely, there's a tremendous difference. It was reminding me of, I had this one interview where it was someone who was a scout. Before I knew he was a scout, we were at a career fair, and he was a young engineer, and we were talking about our single stage turbines and trying to talk about the product itself. And this kid came up with, you know, wide-eyed, excited, and we're using the term SST, and he's like, wow, I don't know anything about that, but I'd love to learn. And, you know, so the engineer and I that were, you know, with us looked at his resume, and he just had a basic engineering background. And we were talking to an individual who really had a tough time articulating what it is that he knew and why he wanted to work for us. But it was clear that he had a 4.0. He did list some gaming championship thing that he won, but there wasn't much else to it. And when we looked at the person with the scouting background, I mean, he had all these activities that he was involved with. So there was a vast difference in the depth and the ability to connect, but also just in the excitement, the passion. I mean, someone saying, look, I don't know anything about what you do, but I am so excited. I'm willing to learn. And for me as a recruiter, I'll take that all day. I mean, anybody with character and passion, you can go anywhere with those people. But if you have someone who is the smartest person in the world, but they don't have the character, or the drive, or the passion, it's a totally different scenario when you put them to a company. So I've seen that distinctly with scouts or scouting or people with that type of background, just different characteristic, different way to engage, and a different level of excitement with them.
Thank you. Reginald.
I would agree with that. I mean, it's this is why I think, you know, we call these things the soft skills, but they're the differentiators in terms of success, right? In terms of one's ability to be motivated to do what needs to be done, to learn the things that need to be learned, and to be a good citizen in the space. Right, you know, when I deal with employee relations issues, right, where complaints, where people do things that they shouldn't do in terms of interacting, and it's in part because they didn't learn to play well with others, and it's a really fundamental thing, right? But they didn't learn to play well with others, and we can see the difference, right, between the people who learned to play well with others and those who didn't. And when we're interviewing, right, we can see that in the way in which people answer questions. And so these things are universal, and they are the intangible success factors.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question that comes in is, there's a growing voice in society to encourage youth to enter trades and apprenticeship style career paths. And you and I, the three of us, were talking about, you know, Scouts is, I call it the liberal arts youth program. And I think it does instill that kind of passionate, like, not, you know, you just want to learn. You just turn into somebody that wants to be more knowledgeable about a lot of things. So as an alternative to all, you know, everyone going to college and getting degrees, do you see this from where you are as a parent and a leader? This person says, I think Scouting prepares our youth for both. But like, are you seeing that? And I think what I think this person's trying to say is, like, Scouting gives you kind of the start to either path. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, I've been part of a number of conversations like that over the past few years, and Obviously working for a university, right? I think a college education is a beautiful thing, right? It keeps me with food on my table. But I think, part of the question is, where is the economy going? Where will the jobs be? What skills and knowledge will be necessary? And as our economy is diverse in terms of the opportunities that are provided, again, this is why I say these things are the intangibles in terms of skill set. So it doesn't really matter what you do, it matters how you do it. And the how you do it is those are the things that I think scouting and other activities where you're engaging with other people and learning to be respectful, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things I think are always going to be necessary. And whether you need a college degree or not is really a function of what it is you really want to do with your life. But what I like about scouting, just in terms of the theory of it and the brief exposure that I had, is the sort of ability to use your hands, your mind, and your heart to engage in the world. And again, I don't think it matters where you use those things. It matters that you have access to them to be able to employ and engage as you do the work going forward.
I'd like to add on to that too. That's a personal question for me because my father was a sheet metal worker, and he was definitely from skilled trades, and I know from growing up, the idea was well, we want you to go to college. We don't want you to do the type of work that we did, and I always felt that was a horrible thing to tell us, because what my father did and a lot of my family and friends' fathers did was pretty honorable. And their skilled trades is a dying art. And I see it on the manufacturing side where we just can't find them. We just can't find that skill set, because a lot of times children are, no, you got to go to college, and college is great, but college isn't for everybody. And not everyone's made to sit in a classroom and sit behind a desk. And I think the one thing with scouting is it opens this vast area of learning to do things with your hands and building something with your hands and really engaging you in a different way. And again, getting you outside and getting you socialized. So I see scouting and, in trades folks, people who work with their hands and build solid things, there's a lot of opportunity there to engage youth in a different way and letting them know that there's a variety of ways that they can explore their passions and what they can be passionate about. So again, having that background with my father and my family were all blue collar workers with some sort of trade, and having a friend who was a Girl Scout. I know a different type of scouting. She was a Girl Scout, and she's a plumber now because she never wanted to go to an office and sit behind a desk, and she loves her job. She's proud of the work that she does every day. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity, but one that scouting can really tap into and get those children who are lost and trying to find their way lined up with something they can be really good at and passionate about.
Yeah, I like that. I like the pointing out that it is a lot of hands-on activity, and it is probably a primer.
And it helps to have a friend who's a plumber. That doesn't that doesn't hurt either.
There's a quick question. This one is just, should I list Eagle Scout on my resume?
I'm sorry, Reginald, I got to jump in. Absolutely, yes. After every Eagle Scout interview process that I go through, and we award the Eagle Scout and tell the family, I give them this piece of advice: put it on every resume, everything that's attached to who you are and what you've accomplished in your life. I don't care how old you are. For me as an interviewer, and I know a lot of my colleagues, if we see scouting or Eagle Scout on a resume, it automatically takes it to the top of the pile, regardless of what your skill sets are. I mean, obviously, if you want to be an engineer and you have no engineering education, that's not going to work in your favor. But if you're within a group of equally qualified people and you have scouting, you're going to get a second look, and sometimes a third look in an interview. It says a lot about the characters, the principles, the values, the things that you bring into the office that, as Reginald could probably tell you better than I could, that are difficult to manage and work with people that don't have that. So when you have that on a resume, you already see there's a solid foundation based on great principles there. So yes, absolutely do that. Keep that on your resume.
Yeah, and I mean, the only tweak is, you know, you said no matter how old you are. I mean, if you've got 20 years of experience and you have to put your Eagle Scout on there, the question for me is, well, what else are you proud of? But it's certainly something in terms of the interview that you can talk about, even if you're let's say 20 years is probably too long, but let's say 10 years, right? If you're 10 years out and you put it on, again, I'm looking looking at one's resume, I'm looking at what has the person done over that 10 years since they received that. But it does matter in terms of being able to talk about, as I mentioned, this sort of ability to work and play well with others. And there, in the questions we ask you, right, there may be an opportunity for you to talk about some of that experience and what you learned and how you've applied it in the world. And that, again, elevates you in terms of your ability to present yourself in a way that we're interested in having you join our teams.
Great. Thank you both. I think that's I mean, a lot of the questions had sort of the same theme, so I covered them one way or the other. And there's a few people on the call that might have a question. And one of our panelists just couldn't make the time, couldn't be here. So we're saving time on the event. It's been about an hour. So anyone on there's a chat function, but you could also probably unmute yourself if you want to introduce yourself and say hi or ask a question. I do know that John, you've got some of definitely the brass of the council here, which is cool, including Ranger Jim on here. So any questions from you guys before we kind of say goodbye? John wants to actually close and say thank you to the two of you, but here's a question, I think. How does any of this apply to recruiting adult volunteers? So, I mean, I think most of this was actually intended to be directed towards current volunteers, understanding like, okay, you fished where you knew where fish were. We've seen membership growth in those pools, but that pool is not going to be big enough for sustained growth. If everybody in the country is having a hard time growing membership, you got to start looking for another pool. And so, but the same principles can be applied to asking your neighbor to be a volunteer. I mean, we talked about this open mindset is an approach to life, it's an approach to people. And, you're not really gonna go to a young child, you probably shouldn't, on the street and start talking to them about scouting. If they're with their parent, spark up a conversation. Find whatever it is that humankind provides us as a common thing and talk about it. If it goes the right direction, hey, you're interested in scouting? I noticed you have a young man or a young girl. And so that is applying these principles to, you are already a leader, you're looking to grow your membership. So that's adult to adult membership growth. The same exact rules basically apply to engaging another adult, including that parent, to say like, what really makes that unit healthier is more scouts and a couple of leaders. And we could have a whole nother conversation about how to tailor that conversation, because I think a lot of times we overwhelm people with requests. But like, if you're like, hey, as a new, let's get your Scout 2 unit meeting. I want you or your significant other, if you're a couple, try to be there for the first few, so that you get the feel for this as much as your scout does. And then they have like what, two, and that's sort of a handshake commitment or whatever. Don't shake their hand under COVID. But try to engage them from the very beginning. But it's about the approach. It's about being willing to step out of our element to say, you're a human, you have kids, you could be in the program, And if the thing that's holding us back from having them in this program is me, I can fix that. You know what I'm saying? So that's my answer to that question. If you guys have additional comments, Jen, Reginald.
Yeah, I think that the only thing I'd add to that is I'm sure you already have some thought about how you recruit adult volunteers. One of the things that I think is really important relative to that is think about the person who you recruit to be a volunteer is a representative of the organization. Does that person, either in the way they currently live their lives and the current activities that they're involved in, do they embody the principles, the way of being that you want your adult, you want other people, the adults who are the parents, to see, and the young people who they'll be working with to see and to have a role model. So it's sort of like in that space when you're with your children and you say, do as I say, not as I do. You want people who are aligned around what they do and what they say, and who you understand, right, in their subtle messages are communicating good values and good respect for the young people and respect for the principles and what it is you're trying to teach and share. So I think it's a similar kind of idea, as Brett mentioned, in this space of knowing that adult volunteers can sometimes be the face of the scouting organization. And if they're not acting in a way that's consistent with how you would want them to act, then you probably don't want that person as a volunteer.
I would add this is following a similar pattern as I was recruited in. I'm going to call myself a young adult, if that's all right.
It's good for us.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Reginald. All right.
Please do.
So I was approached by a good friend, who said, I think this could be a good opportunity for you, and you have the right characteristics. A lot of what Reginald said, and I think peer-to-peer is a great way to do this at a very organic level. It can happen. Also think about the fact that there are organizations that require leaders and employees to be have some type of community involvement. Absolutely tap into that. If you know of someone working in an organization, a big organization like Siemens Energy, ask if they have any requirements like that and see if you can get anyone associated with scouting to talk to someone in a position that might help you get people involved or get the organization donating or participating or supporting in some small way. I mean, it really only takes one person to enlist, and then all of a sudden it grows from there. It just happens organically. And scouting, let's face it, it's a great organization. It really doesn't need a lot in terms of advertisement in the sell job once you're involved. So I would think about some of those routes as well.
I just had one final sentence to add to that, because I think this says, we've heard it from the horse's mouth here in terms of HR and like the fact that the resume tends to float towards the top. Maybe it generates an interviewer, maybe it wouldn't have. And so I think this is sort of the approach to this was to showcase that if scouts get through the program, we are hearing from people who literally develop world-class staff, that it's worthwhile. But it starts at the beginning with the unit leader and the volunteers who are comfortable and emblematic of what scouting is. So that hopefully that answers your question. There's a lot more to recruiting, of course. But, any final call at 7 o'clock, final call for questions from you folks. John's going to say a couple words and then call. So, John Sharkey is our council president. You've got the floor now.
Well, thank you all. Jennifer, Reginald, thank you very much for taking time. I mean, it's a great way to invest an hour on a very worthwhile and meaningful topic for us. I've spent a lot of time in the last few months dealing with some vexing problems as it relates to scouting. As you probably are aware, the national organization has declared bankruptcy. And so we're working through that problem. But at the end of the day, most of my efforts seem to be focused on figuring out the financial viability of this council and this scouting movement in this area. And in many ways, I've sort of left the programming side to the professionals and the very capable volunteers. But one thing that struck me as I sort of look at the problem as a bankruptcy problem, because at the end of the day, horrible things had happened in terms of scouting, and we've got to figure out a way to ensure that people who were harmed are made whole as best we possibly can. At the same time, we are trying to figure out a way to ensure that this movement continues and that it is able to do and deliver against many of the objectives that we have. And when I think at the national level, and I think about sort of, mission and objectives, one of the ones that struck me always is that scouting, aspires to have a culture that welcomes and respects, diverse and different perspectives. And that's a great line. But one of the things that sort of struck me as I listened to the YouTube tonight, I love the concept of I love them. I'm going to actually steal it, but I'll give you both credit. The idea of sort of servant leadership. That is something that I will take from this. And again, I will give you credit, but I'm going to use it. From our point of view, scouting, or my point of view, scouting presents what I think is a pretty good and compelling value proposition. And you both have sort of acknowledged that, yes, that if delivered appropriately and correctly, that's a great thing to do. What we need to do, though, as an organization, is to adopt that idea of servant leadership, but it's also servant leadership in terms of things like inclusion and open-mindedness. And that's something that we all need to work on in terms of our everyday efforts. We need to generate awareness, and we need to invest. And Reginald, some of the things you said really struck me in terms of, we need to invest in adjustment and course corrections to ensure that we are inclusive. And we're going to get it wrong, but the value will be, we got it wrong, we need to fix it, we need to take corrective actions, and that we don't make that mistake again. And the one thing that struck me from tonight's conversation was, you're in a position here A today, you want to get to position B tomorrow. There's a journey that's involved, and you've got to take firm and clear actions to ensure that you get there. And as you're going along, you need to stop, think, and look and say, am I actually doing the right thing? Am I getting the right type of leaders? Am I modeling the right type of behaviors? Am I presenting, again, I love the line of, you got to walk the walk, right? It's just not talk, you got to really do it. And if we're not, we need to be able to pull back, make the changes, and get in that direction. But again, I leave tonight with 2 or 3, little nuggets that I'm going to start thinking about. But I will tell you that servant leadership is something that I will actually use. And again, I really want to thank you both for an honest and direct assessment. I mean, in many ways, you're the consumers of the product that we're trying to deliver, and that's a really powerful position. I'm fat and old now and retired, but I spent my career as a senior executive for Corning. And at the end of the day, when I had my retirement, I gave a speech to the company, and effectively said, though, that at the end of the day, this is all about your consumers, right? Everybody, they're the people who pay the bills. They pay to keep the lights on here. They ensure everything that we do. It's all about the consumers. And in many ways, you both represent consumers, because what we generate, what we produce, gets taken by HR functions and companies and communities and what we need to do is ensure that we are delivering the right people. And how we actually do that is somewhat a function of the program, but also the leaders and the behaviors that we model. So to both of you, thank you very much for really engaging hour. And I've, you've given me a lot to think about. So, and all of us. So thank you very much. And Brett, for you to organize it, it's been a good hour. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be a part of it, and still available if you need any further support. I'm signing
Well,
out.
and so maybe I will call you both up, because you know what? I'm always looking for board members, and I got a lot of work to do, and I want people to model the right behaviors. But no, I will take you both up on that. I'm sure I'll have some follow-up questions. I'll work with Brett, but I'd love to be able to reach out as a resource and just get a
Absolutely.
perspective. It's if anything, I found, diverse and different sounding boards, different perspectives are always valuable. So thanks very
Happy
much.
to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John, Carl?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank everyone for participating tonight, and let everyone know that we did record this, and we will put together an email that we will send out through the professional staff on how to get onto the video to watch it again. I know there were a lot of other meetings that happened tonight, so not everyone had that ability to watch it tonight. So we'll give them that opportunity to watch it. And then I want to throw out a challenge to everybody. And my challenge is based on 3 R's that I heard that our two panelists say. And as we were talking, I made sure I wrote both of these notes down. And what I want everyone to think about is, how can everyone here help all of us that are involved in this program think about how we can look at rebranding some of our programs so everyone understands what we have to offer. How can we re-advertise out the information that has been shared? And then lastly, how can we show that we are still relevant? Thank you all for joining us this evening. Brett, throw it back to you.
Thank you. Yes, that's good challenges. There's always homework with scouting. But thank you for everybody. Oh, Nancy, looks like we're saying thank you. So everybody can sign off. We'll make this video available. I really appreciate the 2 of you taking time. We're also busy, but it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Really
Have a good
great.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night now.
everyone. Take care.
Good night.